Thanks everybody for showing up. I know it's always interesting to try to get over here on a Monday, fight traffic, do everything else. So I appreciate it. Actually, if Neil didn't know me, he would have tried to have said my last name and butchered it, which is usually what I get. So it's pronounced Kacyvenski. I always have a funny story. So I played 8 years, and I'd wanted to play since just a little kid, 8, 9 years old, and that was my dream to play. And when I got there, it was amazing. I got to the NFL, was drafted, and playing alongside Ricky Waters, guys I idolized growing up. And when I got there, my next goal was to start a football game and to win the job outright. And I was an inside linebacker. And my third year in the NFL, I won the job. I was the starting inside linebacker. I'd beaten out 4 other guys for the job. And just a ton of hard work to get there, and it's the season opener. I'd been through just a battle and training camp, and I kind of withstood all the people trying to take what I considered my job, right? And you got to put the work in and be able to do that. And you remember that feeling when you're a little kid. And we opened up in Oakland, and my first game that I'm going to start after winning the job. Open up the season, and I see on the schedule, we get in there, I got in there like 3 hours before the game started, and look on the schedule, and I see that defense is going to get introduced. And I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to get introduced just like a little kid. I remembered it. And going through it, warm-ups, like, so excited. Getting heckled by Raiders fans, which is typical, especially when in Seattle. Going through that and getting ready for it to be announced as we go back in, come out, and just ready to explode with passion, with excitement, with everything. And they're going through, they get to me, and the announcer says, "Now introducing Isaiah Kacyvenski." And coming out of the tunnel, I was like, I would be lying to say it didn't affect me. It absolutely did. I was midway through the first quarter until I broke out of a funk. But all jokes aside, it was a pretty funny deal. So I appreciate whatever my name is pronounced correctly. So tonight I'm going to focus on wearable tech in sports, and it's not going to be. A lot of it's just going to be from my own experience as I think about what I would have used as a player, what I would have needed as a player, and how I think innovation and trends are going to intersect, especially around this idea of wearable tech in sports, and really thinking outside the box and how that can happen in a lot of different ways. And excited to be able to do that. Here's a couple of pictures of me as a player in the NFL. For the most part, I spent 8 years in the NFL, but I was a grinder. I was never a superstar by any stretch of the imagination. I was someone that, stayed in the NFL for 8 years as a special teams guy. I was that grinder, the person that would run through any type of wedge, any type of wall that you had to. I'd run through a brick wall if you asked me to, and I loved it. I think one of my teammates, Sean Springs, who ended up playing 14 years in the NFL, always used to say, we used to watch films on Monday, and it was like a train wreck going down. I was a kickoff specialist, so I'd be able to have these 3-4 guys across there, 300 pounds, and I was the guy that one guy takes out 3. If you do the math, the tackle is someone's going to make the tackle, and I was always that guy. And I remember him looking over during my rookie year. He goes, "For a Harvard guy, you sure are stupid to be able to take the wedge on." I took pride in that, being able to do my job well, and that's what it came down to for me. My path. I'll just give a little background on myself and kind of move on. And by the way, as I'm giving this talk, anyone that has any questions, it's pretty informal, so feel free to raise your hand, ask me questions, just blurt it out. It doesn't matter to me. So I'll give a little background on my path to the NFL. Then after, I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, Endicott, New York, youngest of 5 kids. Grew up in poverty and found football when I was I was almost 9 years old at the time, and it led me really to a path. And the men and the women around the game really led me to a path of self-discipline, in a way to find myself as a man. And you know, really something as I look back on now, I couldn't have that replaced in the classroom or anywhere else. It was integral into how I grew up and how I looked at my formative years. Fast forward, yeah, I ended up, you know, going to Harvard in such a way where, you know, I would have never expected it in 1,000 years to end up there, and I was so glad I did. It was such a transformative experience in my life. I'm going to go into that a little after this, but you know, I was a pre-med undergrad, 4 years there. Finished that. It was a pretty brutal process, trying to juggle you know, studies in class as well as everything on the field, as well as having 4 different types of jobs. I didn't have a lot of money coming from home, so was a bouncer at 2 different bars. One of them, I don't even know, it used to be called the Crimson Grill. It's not even around anymore. It's some fancy place in Harvard Square. They made up a job for me in the equipment room. I was the hockey stick security guard, where I was able to do work and watch hockey sticks as everything went on. It was a pretty awesome job. Retired, and then after 10 different surgeries, I'm going to go into those a little later, but you know, during those 10 surgeries, the time in the NFL, was able to really learn a lot about where I thought I could improve, and a lot about the human body, period. A lot about being able to come back from injury, a lot of asking questions with 1,000 different specialists around a bunch of different types of injuries. So I'm going to talk about that a little. And then retired. Had been an investor and had been entrepreneurial minded when I played, and went to Harvard Business School after I did retire. And after a stint at Goldman Sachs and realizing that wasn't my thing, I wanted to be involved in the entrepreneurial world, and joined MC10. I've been there 4 years now since. So it's been a really cool spot for me as I thought about all of these things I think about tonight, as I thought about trying to find that fraction of a step, trying to find that 1% increase I could find, and I was constantly looking for it. I think one of the biggest things, you know, to kind of wrap this part up is, you know, I never lost that feeling it was like to be 9 years old and just wanting to play so bad, and wanting to find ways. And you know, I thought of my body as a business, but I never approached the game like it was a business. It was a passion. It was a love for the game that I was constantly trying to improve. And one of the themes that's going to come out tonight is, you know, athletes and a lot of the people that make it even all the way up to the elite level are driven by training and doing over and over and over again. And this leads to this idea of overtraining, right? How much is enough? And whenever there was a question of how much there, you know, was enough, I continued to train more and train more. And looking back on my career, 100% I did that over and over and over again. So, you know, so much so where it was definitely a detriment to my development, to, you know, how I approached my time as a player. You know, just, you know, the idea of just shooting myself in the foot with just being run down too much. And I'm going to give some pretty good examples of that, even throughout my career, where I should have stood up and took notice around that. So, you know, one other aspect that I kind of wanted to touch on as well is my time here at Harvard, as well as my time at Harvard Business School, you know, as undergrad, really helped shape how I thought and how I still think about the world, and has really helped shape how I think about business at MC10, as well as a lot of other things I'm involved with, which is, you know, that my undergrad experience, you know, I was that pre-med undergrad, and I remember having a class by Eric Mazur. He's a physicist, one of the, you know, world renowned. He's been here for a long time, and I was always so set in there was one right answer. And I remember one day in class where it kind of changed me forever, where he had about 6 different ways to arrive at 3 different answers, which was, you know, for me at the time was you know, blew my mind. And that was one example that really shattered one of my beliefs, where there was that one right answer. And I took that with me. I never forgot that. And it really helped me start to question why to everything. and how did you get that answer? How could you come at a different answer, et cetera. My time at Harvard Business School, as I decided not to go to medical school after I retired, was focused on not just having an idea, but really developing a very, very crisp and clear argument around that. Why is there's this gray area around any type of idea, and really developing that to the core. And that was one of those things that kind of tying both of those together has really, really helped propel me to kind of where I am today, doing a lot of different things. There's a couple examples that I'm going to kind of pull on where there's this guesswork, and this kind of the theme throughout this talk here, and is really around taking that guesswork out of training and how you prepare to feel good. And that's not necessarily something that is only constricted to athletes or elite athletes. In the end, everybody wants to feel good. And my focus and the focus of wearable tech is around capturing all of that data to actually make that meaningful, and to be able to change that behavior to make you either perform better or avoid injury. And that is kind of the focus, and I've got a lot of different examples around that. One of the biggest ones that as I was preparing for the draft is kind of an example of the overtraining example I was talking about earlier. But as I was preparing for the NFL draft coming out in 2000, my calling card was I was going to work. I was working out twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, and I didn't know if it was enough, and literally be lying in bed, and I, kind of a pang of guilt came up. Boom! I don't know if you did enough, so I'd go out and do more. And that's just like a common theme. I'm going to talk about a little more about with just elite athletes in general. And I remember preparing for the draft, and saw a guy, Mike Boyle, who's a big trainer here, right in the area. He prepared a lot of guys for the NFL draft. Has anybody heard of Mike Boyle? So well known out of Burlington, and he had actually trained one of the best combine results-oriented piece with Mike Mamula, who ended up running one of the fastest 40 times ever for a defensive end at the time. And I kind of put faith in him, and he looked at how I was doing things. And this is, as I have 3-4 months to prepare for all types of testing, 40, vertical jump, everything else, where I was going to do more and more and more to be able to actually produce. He sat me down. He said, Isaiah, you're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to trust me with how you train. We're going to back off. You're just doing too much. You're doing way too much. And it took a lot for me to be able to trust him. And the most important time in my life, what had got me to that point, was just outworking people. And I had known that. I put a sign on my bed when I was in high school: let no one outwork you. And that was my thing. And but I suspended that for some time, and lo and behold, I got faster and I got stronger. And I literally went from 3 workouts to a short 45-minute to an hour and 15-minute workout a day that was intense with him. And I started to see results. My bench press went from 225 pounds for reps for doing 25 all the way up to 34 in a span of 2-3 months, which is amazing. And then you talk about a 40 time that went from a 4.7 guy to running a 4.52 for the Dolphins. They came in. I was just doing too much, and for that, it should have dawned on me, and I should have carried that over with my career. As I got drafted and went through the process, I went back to what got me there. I was gonna, be the first guy in, last one out. I was gonna try to do as many workouts as I could a day. I was gonna try to absolutely expend every single ounce of energy I had every single day, and because I didn't know, it was kind of a guesswork all around that. I'm gonna give another example around hydration. Later on, but I've also, there's examples I have around, I had 7 diagnosed concussions in the NFL, and the idea of taking guesswork out, putting objective data points around that is all kind of around all these themes that we talk about. In the end, I'm going to go back to it as well. Letting data tell the story between how each of us are different. If you can capture that in an accurate way, you can start to tell a story of what your day looked like and why and how you want to perform better. So this is the sports advisory board put together at MC10 as I joined. Really saw a lot of potential. I had, coming out of Harvard Business School, I had 9 offers, and really decided, and the idea, MC10 was still, it was nine people. It was very much an idea. There was about 9 people in the company, and trying to figure out what we wanted to do. And this was my idea very shortly after I joined, to be able to help us think about deploying the technology in sports and fitness. And luckily we had a board that was, and 2 founders that were on board with being able to look at this and understand how we could understand common themes that occur between sports on how you optimize performance, minimize that risk of injury. And each of these people were targeted for one reason, be able to, and kind of that common theme between each of these people is the idea that they were very thoughtful about how they approached the game, very thoughtful about how they got to where they were, very eloquent in being able to do that. This was their life, their sport was their life, and it revolved around that, and they tried to optimize. And one of those themes that came out, and I continue to say that, it was always guesswork. It was always a guess. And across the board, every single person would say, besides a coach, but even a coach would say overtrained, but you could overcoach, I guess. This idea of overtraining is one of those themes that has come out loud and clear across the board. And to be able to dial that in from, Andrew talking about being able to throw and then overdoing and being able to metrics on even the most basic of things, just rep counting, period, there is extreme value to that. And we're going to go into a lot of these pieces, but these guys were very, very key and integral in being able to think about, if you could put electronics anywhere and you could innovate around wearable tech, what would you do? And what would you measure and why? And the ideas around meaningful metrics. Oh, sorry. I can go in and talk about how big the market's going to be, and how it's going to grow over time. You see estimates, by 2019, having a wearable tech market over $60 billion, and you really think about the early adopters around that being elite athletes. And I also would bucket in, elite soldiers as well. I think there's a strong parallel between elite athletes, elite soldiers, as well as, if you think about early adopters as well, the most sick too. So the people that are most motivated to either gain performance or get better somehow. Why wearable tech and why in sports? I kind of have talked about it already, but the ability to be able to unlock this data and capture this data in a very accurate and succinct way, to actually give you feedback where you could make differences, make change in your life to become better, So I'm going to walk through, and I've already walked through a bunch of very different ideas around, how I think wearable tech could play a role. And even going back to, I'll give one more example, going back to the different types of injuries I had, and almost this cascade effect of how I changed the way I ran based on having a microfracture surgery to an ankle injury to a back injury, how it's all connected in some way, and being able to really have that off at the pass, this cascade of injuries that can result from one injury leading to other injuries through a compensation, other pieces, is all connected. And this is, for the most part, this is white space in a lot of ways, and being able to tap into that and put metrics around that as you rehabilitate and do other things, to be able to listen through objective data around performance betterment. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, no, so I mean, I think if you think about size of market, yeah, absolutely there is a larger market, especially in, you think about youth, high school, college sports. Um, the way you think about it is this early adapter phase, depending on what use case and what metrics you want to look at. There's real value in, as well as there's a better understanding, kind of this natural understanding of, how can I use a tool to actually get better or help me put some absolute numbers, data around getting better. And I think I guess the talk of elite athletes not is kind of that, and that market is fairly small if you think about kind of the people, but to be able to look at a very, very strong use case to have those people spearhead integration and adoption of technologies is, instead of having to educate, right? Instead of having to educate, your average, ice hockey player around some type of metric that you'd be looking at. There's an automatic adoption in that. So no, I agree. And you think about the size of markets, period, as MC10 looks into, we're divided up into consumer and healthcare and medical device. I mean, even, kind of the sports and fitness market is tiny compared to other markets, say consumer wellness and other pieces. Like, those markets are massive. And it all kind of is a stepwise function on adoption, the way we look at it. And I think a lot of people around the world understand that it has to start somewhere. And there's also, kind of a cost factor that plays into that as well, depending on where you want to start. I think, going back to, actually this ties directly into that too, is in the end, people want access to data to be able to improve regardless of what level you're at. And it's very difficult to improve what you can't measure. You can talk about it, but if you can't measure it, it's still qualitative in a lot of different aspects. It's kind of the way it's always been. So how can you capture that, and what could those meaningful metrics be? And that is the secret sauce. What are the meaningful metrics? How could, as I talk about democratizing a lab, right? Being able to take those gold standards in a lab that with big bulky equipment, and then taking that out of the lab to actually have this meaningful metric that means something. Take all those learnings that you've had in the lab to be able to then unlock those learnings across a broader population in the field, in a regular setting or in a field setting, or however you want to do that. So there's that piece, and right now we're on the cusp of being able to do that, unlock those learnings for a lot of different. And when I say we, I mean the world is on the cusp of being able to do that. I think broadly overall, where I see the world going, especially around wearable tech. If you think, I firmly believe in 10 years, you're going to look back, and we all are going to look back, and we're going to say, wow, that was crazy. I mean, we just got up every morning. We're just kind of winging it, like on our physiology. We were just kind of like, you guys are just like, oh, it looks kind of good. I guess we're just going to, I feel pretty good. I'm just going to go. I think those days, when you think about your health and your performance, everything else, those days are going to be gone. And I think the analogy I always like to make is, you think about cell phones 15 years ago, right? And you think about your cell phone now, you can't live without it, and it's almost crazy, imagining life without your cell phone. And if you haven't, just try losing or damaging a cell phone. It feels like you're like cut off from the rest of the world, although it's pleasant sometimes. But I think, in the end, as I move on to the next slide, this proactive approach on how you think about yourself and how you think about your performance, how you think about your health, is completely different. It's an absolute different way to think about how you listen through objective data to what is going on, and having some parameters around that. And that mind shift of even we'll think about even coaching, or even go as far as to say doctor visits. Is you have this, how the way it's always been. You have episodic checkups, and it's reactive and very, something happens, you go to the doctor, this is what happens. Imagine the ability to be able to stay in front of that, proactive, to head catastrophe off the past, to really, really hit the nail on the head when it comes to performance, time after time after time after time. And to actually make your practice more efficient, make your every single movement you have more efficient is the ultimate goal. And again, it comes back to taking guesswork out of it. This is that performance envelope where you really, really try to maximize that performance, minimize that risk of injury. A lot of what I've talked about today revolves around this, and being able to do this qualitatively is the way it's always been. I think we've all strived for this, but you have to be able to put numbers on exactly what you want to talk about. And there's a lot of different examples where, for me, one of these that was relevant in my playing days was, for my days here, I was a cramper, and I'd go through, I'd lock up, full body lockups. Well, the full body lockups didn't start until I got into the NFL, but was locking up here, absolutely like brutal, where you're kind of, it's one of the most frustrating things where you're kind of out of the game because your body can't respond quickly. You can't get ions in electrolytes in as quickly as possible. And during my time in the NFL, so I was with the Seahawks my second year in the NFL. I had a period of 3 games where I had 2 full body lockups where it literally looked, I was like, sniped in the background and like, dead on the ground, where I couldn't move. I had, chest, back, thighs, hamstrings, everything locked up. And then our head coach at the time, Mike Homer with the Seahawks, who was, he looked like a big teddy bear, but he was not. He was someone that had this immense thirst to win, no matter what, and I love him. And he was pretty tough on me about this, and it was very frustrating to me because I was downing as much fluids going into games with like just a stomach full of fluids, and I couldn't manage them. It was absolute guesswork to me. I couldn't do anything about that. And so much so where I was getting, I went through that stretch, he would drop the hammer on me, and I was starting to get IVs before the games and at halftime proactively, no matter what. And to me, after the season, and I spoke with the coaching staff, spoke with the training staff, and decided that was a little bit much. I might want to get a real handle on what type of electrolytes I was losing and how much actual sweat loss I was losing at one time. So they shipped me off to the Gatorade Sports Science Institute after the season, and there it was actually is a line. I'll never forget the experience. You go in and you have 45 minutes in a controlled setting. It's 86 degrees. It's 75% humidity. Everybody testing the same piece, but I broke one of the proudest records of all time, the sweat record at Gatorade Sports Science Institute. It was almost, it was a little over a gallon of water in a 45-minute time. And I found, I knew I was losing a lot. I didn't realize that, as we broke it down, they actually look at the composition of the sweat from sodium, potassium, calcium. I was actually losing 2 to 3 times, depending on the electrolyte, that of a normal person per the same amount of sweat loss. So I was literally always going to be in deficit if I didn't actually compensate the hydration. Even with that, it was still a battle. But I had a better idea of how much added electrolytes to add per an hour of active time, and actually was able to take that guesswork out of it. And it was something I was never going to win, and didn't even have a chance to win if I didn't go through that. So, kind of further speaks to this idea of minimizing that risk of injury, maximizing performance, and being able to make sure I had the right tools to be able to do that. one of the other aspects I want to talk about before I get to the next slide is this idea of really taking this holistic point of view on the way you look as an athlete, look at how you train. And not only how you train, so there's this performance on 2 hours of gameplay, but there's 22 hours left in the rest of the day. And being able to understand how those days lead into each other, about how you feel and how you can perform, is unbelievably crucial. It's really, really important around that. And athletes understand this, but there's not really a ton of metrics you can put around that. And it was, in a lot of ways, guesswork on data points that you're trying to piece together, right? And being able to have a capture of data on, output, and as that relates to readiness, recovery, fatigue, tie back into stress, and then sleep as well, is something that where you think about this entire way to feel good. You have this level of how hard did I work? How can I make sure I feel better the next day? What do I do in between to make sure I feel better? In and of itself, it really doesn't mean anything, but you start to pull data points together on over a sustained period of time to understand. As you practice and you start to lead into gameplay, you have a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks worth of data to understand how you perform so well. And maybe you think about right now in a week's gameplay, you understand how you performed both on the field and off the field, and what you did to prepare for the next day over and over and over again. And you have a level of success. Say you're in the zone, you're absolutely feeling amazing and you're playing amazing, whatever sport you're talking about. And by the way, this isn't only sports, but this is an analogy. Being able to look at that, go back and play on this idea of probability, right? Being able to recreate those same events again to make sure that you feel well. You feel as best as you possibly can. You then have a blueprint to feel well, right? And you can tweak it however you want, but the idea of being able to have those data points and then recreate those data points to give you the highest probability for success. And that's one different way to look at the way you've ever done things, because you never really know, right? You never know what you had to do, and you actually be able to put numbers to think about output day over day. What's output mean by itself? If you've practiced, how hard you worked, energy expenditure during practice, by the way, which is, there's not a lot of people being able to have the ability to be able to do that, right? How hard did you work? Your most intense part of your day, how hard did you work? A lot of people just don't know. Being able to tie that back through data points is also very, very, it's interesting and it's insightful in so many different ways. And you could also do this then you think about times where you have data points that lead up to bad play, not feeling well, and avoiding those ways, sleep habits, et cetera. There's a whole different series of pieces that you can talk about. So it's just as powerful as what you know as what you don't know. But you need data around different metrics to be able to do that. I always like to, the way I think about this is the way I know, football, I'll give a football analogy. I hate to keep giving them, but a lot of people don't know, football coaches, defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, in the end, it's this battle of wits. It's this battle of probability. You see a defensive coordinator up in the booth. He literally has 8 sheets spread out on every single down, distance, formation, everything else, and there's a probability ranking on what he thinks the offense is going to run for every down, distance, any single part of the field you can talk about is broken down in 1,000 different ways till Sunday. On the other side, the offensive coordinator is doing the same thing. What he's trying to guess what the defensive coordinator is going to pick to be able to stop this play. Well, he thinks I'm going to pick this, I'm going to pick this, this, and this. So what you want to do is be able to, what they're trying to do in the end is be able to put their players in the best position to make a play. Put their players in the best position to be able to have success in the end. And this is the same idea, and it's no different at all. In the end, I think the Super Bowl is actually a really good example, right? You have a play called the last play of the game. Patriots, Seahawks Super Bowl, this last Super Bowl. And formation-wise, it absolutely made sense for the Seattle Seahawks to call the play they did. Although, hindsight's 20/20. Formation-wise, they had the matchups that they absolutely wanted. It was almost an automatic reaction for what type of defense the Patriots left in. In the end, there is this idea of being able to make the play when you need to make the play, which is to say on the other side, data doesn't make the player. There's some things you just cannot measure. You can't measure heart, you can't measure perseverance, you can't measure a whole lot of different things. But my ability and I guess my hope, I should say, is the ability to be able to put some metric around heart one day, to be able to flip it around on its head and be able to understand what type of deficit you could be in but still push through is kind of an amazing thing. And in a lot of different ways that could be absolutely like unbelievably unique content for play, for anything else, to be able to measure that in some way. I hope there's not any Patriots fans in here. I was there for that last one. There's no cheering or anything else. So just talk about some different types of metrics, and then I'm gonna kind of end early, and anyone wants to ask questions or dive into some other things I haven't covered is also free. But you're just going to talk about how these things can overlap and integrate. But you start to think about different types of metrics you want to look at. These are just examples, right? I mean, these in and of themselves don't mean anything. To be able to tie these to meaning is important. In motion, you can make up 1,000 different ways to look at that. But does that mean anything, and why? And whenever I look at motion, I think about the difference of your ability, regardless of sport, your ability to be able to have this level of repeatability of movement. And the difference between being good and being great is the ability to be able to be exact, to repeat that movement over and over and over again. A fraction of an inch off, it's not good enough. And you want to hit the nail, going back to the other analogy I made, hit that nail on the head every single time when you practice. And it optimizes efficiency during practice. We're actually practicing and giving you a feedback loop on the right things when needed.
You include muscle memory within that? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you think about innovation, you think about muscle memory. This isn't necessarily that anything that's available now, but the ability to be able to tie, you'd call muscle memory, most people would call it EMG, right? And being able to understand how the muscle fires, et cetera, and how that waveform may change over time. But really think about this as the world is your oyster. All these different metrics you could think of, as well as prove in the lab. Some of them are just tougher. What exactly does this mean as you try to relate this to on field, on ice, on court, everything else? And then eventually being able to understand how this all trickles down it's not just about elite athletes. It's about how can everybody feel good? How can each person, from an elderly woman in a nursing home to that elite athlete and everybody in between, how can you feel good? And how can you optimize your day to feel better? And this is an extreme case around that, but being able to do that. Being able to, like the one example I've already given is this idea of overtraining, and being able to look at overtraining as not only this 2 hours, but as this 24-hour approach. For me, it was more than 2 hours going back and forth on how I trained, but being able to understand this level of stress over a sustained period of time on your body, where I used to 100% as I was younger and preparing, I used to understand the sky was limit, that energy was infinite for a day. In the end, it's not. And the ability to be able to be in some zone where you can recover correctly is what I talk about all the time, and the way I think about different metrics that you can start to understand. But I'm going to talk about the theme around all this is guesswork, but you talk about impact to the head has always been guesswork, right? And we're starting to uncover more and more data around measuring force of impact to the head over time, regardless of sport, and being able to look at that. And that is, to have the technology to a point where it is where you can do that is great. I mean, we're on the dawn of a new time. To be able to put numbers over periods of 1, 2, 3 seasons as you switch sports, you actually get a number of how many times you were hit in the head. And this is stuff that people you think about some of the studies as well as some of the personal understanding I know of impacts over a season. You start to think about. And even some of the larger published studies where you think about parents and youth athletes on being able to take impacts over a season, and you ask them how many times you think your child or your son or your daughter was hit in the head over a period of season. This would happen to be football, and some of the impacts to the head were their guess was probably somewhere less than 50. Some of the impacts of the head were almost over 2,000. So it's the idea of having some type of metric to understand how many times is actually happening, rather than this qualitative piece. This is the way things have always been. To be able to capture some of that is interesting. Another one I always focus on, it's near and dear to my heart, is this idea of putting quantitative metrics on rehabilitation, on being able to come back from injury and kind of take that guesswork out of that, right? And this idea of being pushed back or not back, or even the idea of having injury precursors to precursors to injuries that you could potentially have if you look at symmetry from both sides of the body, as you look at different aspects around what are precursors to that, to knee injury, to other pieces, to fatigue, to everything else. I already mentioned the idea of hydration, the guesswork that comes around that, and being able to use data also as kind of a coaching tool as well, as a way to inform. That example I had of kind of this probability game back and forth between coaches. You think about how that literally should be tied together with performance, being able to put your team in the best position. It seems like it's crazy not to tie both of those together in some way. And I remember some of the experiences I had as a player. And being able to think about this, going back to the idea of freshness, readiness, ability to play at my best by avoiding injuries. I remember kind of some of those were inherent learnings of the kind of a time, but being able to look back again on another experience. I gave the preparing for the NFL draft experience, but another one is I was drafted in 2000, and we made the Super Bowl and the 2005 season, 2006 Super Bowl, and from 2000, for the first 5 years, it was an absolute beating on our bodies as far as training camp, every single practice, everything else. And I remember, taking every single rep like it was my last rep in a lot of different ways. That's how I definitely approached it. And the year we went to the Super Bowl, Mike Holmgren comes to us right after training camp ended our first week of practice. He said, "You guys, we're going to do things differently this year. I'm not going to beat the crap out of you. We're going to take the pads off, and we're going to practice hard without pads, and we want you guys fresh every year." And I'm telling you what, it was when we did that, it was week 1, and there's a 17-week season. Then you have 4 weeks that lead up to the Super Bowl. We were unbelievably fresh every single week. And you start to look back at the ability, so we weren't beating ourselves up in practice. It was nice and fresh for games. And it wasn't an exact science, right? But this is the idea of, getting another glimpse at doing less ended up being more for me. And being able to dial in training, there's other examples. The Seahawks now actually are fully bought into the idea of wearable technology and being able to understand the metrics around performance in practice and how that carries over, and being able to dial it in separately for each player, really, really important. Another example, using wearable tech data to actually improve performance. The German national soccer team, and you look at the last World Cup, they had that dialed in and using a wearable tech system that they did, the MyCoach system, to be able to measure and look at output day after day in practices. And you think about how fresh they looked the entire World Cup, and they looked like a machine. I mean, their nickname was the Machine, and they were. It was pretty impressive, and that was a team that had fully bought into the relevance of data and the relevance of trying to measure day after day to take that guesswork out. Let's take it out. I mean, there's tools available, and quite honestly, we're kind of hit the tip of the iceberg on the ability to be able to do that. But even looking at output day after day to dial that in is important as you understand how each player and how hard they were working, and how you can really embrace this idea of too much is not better. If you look at a lot of the different types of data that is out there, as well as kind of space that has the ability to be able to capture in a quantitative way, to be able to look at a lot of these different metrics over time, and the ability to be able to do them accurately, right? You're kind of this trend of having not a lot of faith in a device where you kind of say, oh, it sort of says it's going to do what it's going to do. The ability to be able to have full faith in this accuracy level on device is actually going to be really, really important as you think about trying to make a difference. And if you have data and the data doesn't mean anything, what are you going to do? And I think that's off-putting to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. Being able to dial that in a way that's going to be really important, and as well as this level of engagement. There's kind of like a couple of final last points I can talk about on some of the pieces around gathering data, and kind of some of the push-pull with those gathering the data and those the data is actually being taken from, which is kind of a pretty deep talk you can have around that. But one of the biggest things is, and the questions you have to be able to answer is who gets access to the data. Can this data be used against the player, regardless of what level you're talking about? Those are always interesting pieces to be able to think about, as well as is there buy-in from the top down, or is it being pushed from underneath? I really think having a lot of different perspectives and just speaking with a lot of different players across sports, the ability for wearable tech to really, really be adopted has to come from the players themselves. Just because it's very difficult to be able to be pushed on. They have to be able to understand the value it's going to create for them. The idea of this big brother feel is not gonna fly, and the idea that this could be used against me come decision making time for cuts and contracts and everything else. Players absolutely don't want that. And there's this whole other side where you can improve performance to be able to say, this can help me play longer, this can help me play better, this can help me avoid risk of injury based on other things. That's about it. And that, quite honestly, that's what I was looking for as a player. I was looking for that extra little step to be able to really, really take my job seriously and dial in the correct way. Yeah.
Still piecing together my question.
Okay.
So I'm kind of half raising, but I want to make sure that I word it exactly the way I want to word it. So
Okay.
continue on.
Okay. Just take a shot. Take a shot. You can half bake it and still throw it.
Yeah. So I'll fill in with a question in the meantime. So how much of this is opportunity space that MC10 is working on versus you see as kind of white space?
Yeah, I mean, the perspective from tonight is just me as think about this as white space. I think there's a lot of interest in a lot of these spaces. One of the things that's intriguing about MC10 is the ability to deploy electronics where it's not going to interfere with practice, gameplay, et cetera. So it gives access to a lot of different things. Again, I'll come back to one of the biggest pieces is, you can talk about, a lot of the different types of things I put up there. To have a meaningful metric to come back to, gold standards you come back to be able to say, hey, this means something, as well as you actually got to tie raw data into that as well and filter it through an algorithm and everything else. That's not easy. And the fact is, you can't tackle every single, I'm saying you, meaning MC10, is not going to be able to tackle every single thing. This is more of a talk on my own perspective around how I think and where I think there is opportunity across the board. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the ones I feel really strongly about, and even put it up here as well, is this idea of, the ability to be able to look at brain activity during actual, EEG, during actual gameplay versus non-gameplay versus taking a test versus, other ways to gauge performance based on that metric. The ability to be able to put up and deal with lots of information without even a blip on the EEG screen is actually an impressive teaser to other things, as well as a way to look at your ability to be able to do a lot of different things. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of things we could be working on, but we can't possibly do it all.
Isaiah, do you think that if we reach a certain level where we're going with the concussion stuff, as far as having accurate data like this, football does not exist in 20 years? If they knew the trauma, I played Division I, I didn't play the NFL, I played receiver Division I, so I had 3 concussions. But if they actually found out, football, these kids, like my kids, I'm 26 years old, they're not playing football, won't even be allowed to play, because it's extreme. I mean, it's a collision game. It's not a contact sport, right? Football's a collision game.
Mm-hmm.
If they knew that, when they actually do find out this data, I have a feeling like it's going to completely take everything away from them. I mean, look at how much they're changing the rules already in the NFL, right? I mean, with as far as leading with the head, with all the stuff that's going on, the concussion, if you have any sort of scramble on the sideline, you're out, you got to go get checked. I mean, it's like it's changed so much even from when you were playing in 2000, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I retired in 2008, but yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you're saying. That is, you actually already mentioned it, right? That is if the game stays still. The game absolutely has to change. There's, 100% conviction around. It has to be played safer. The way that you played football, the way I played football, it has to absolutely change. From when I was a little kid, being on defense, and my mindset was, when the ball is snapped, I'm going to hit whoever it takes in my way and the ball carrier as hard as I can every single play. And it's not even like a guess, rather than changing your mindset to say, I'm actually just going to tackle the guy with the ball. I'm going to get him to the ground, rather than trying to explode into someone every single time. It's a way to change the way you think, and the game has to change. And a football purist might call that soft. It doesn't matter. There's safe ways to play, and I think technology definitely has a seat at the table around that. And I think the rule changes that have happened, as far as that's kind of the pushing in the right direction. In the end, it goes back to it as well. You want to have accountability for the actual athletes themselves. If you continue to coach, and you want kind of reinforcing pieces around the coaching around safe impact. The fact is, you keep on hitting your head, and you have objective data to show you, or keep hitting your head. It's kind of the ability to be able to kind of slap on the wrist. If you don't stop hitting your head, you're not going to play. And that's kind of where it can go, right? And the ability to be able to change the way it's played and have accountability around that change, where it's not just kind of speak. It's actually backed up by data. Here's how the game is changing. Is important, and that's going to be important. But in order for the game to survive, it 100% has to do that, and it will. I mean, I don't have any qualms about that happening at all. Yeah.
So how do you think, going off his point, how can wearable tech drive awareness around safety? How can you get parents to realize that, maybe there is some sort of fear-mongering going on with the whole concussion epidemic? Not only making the game safer, but making the players play smarter. How does that drive? Because he's right. I mean, like the NFL, all these games. I mean, we really don't know what soccer, heading the ball does to you. And so, obviously, sports are fundamental to us as human beings. As men, as women growing up, and we need that. And so how do we drive that awareness through this technology?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure what you meant about the fear mongering. I think one of the biggest pieces, as far as my perspective, the ability to collect data over time. I mean, and let the data speak for itself. Either it speaks this way or that way, but like to inform on how we look at playing and enforce safe play. And what I mean by this, even the most basic way, right, is it took 30 years, 40 years for the medical community to say, hey, it's not good to hit your head over and over again. It's not good. And it took that long. It's like, it's crazy, but it's like, all right, that's great, guys. We all agree on that, but it seems like pretty basic. So the ability to be able to say, hey, you have a minimum threshold. It's not good to keep hitting your head over and over. Not that it's like a magic number, but you don't want to hit your head over and over. Now, or you want to minimize those impacts, right? And that's kind of where you're going to. In the end, it's not a fear monger to say, we want you to hit your head hard over and over again. So you want to minimize those aspects. Now, what that means in the end, the medical community is going to have to gather data and let that science speak in some ways, but being able to have some level of objective data out there around that is the piece. But in the end, I think it's going to be very rare you look at objective data, especially around force of impact, and say, oh my God, this is crazy, da, da, da. It's going to be over a long period of time based on some type of parameters is my gut feeling. Much the way you look at the kind of range for heart rate. If you think about getting hit in the head over 1,000, 2,000 times, I mean, think about a medical community putting an actual number on times per year versus how many sports versus the ability to be able to say, hey, how many times we would recommend underneath that being. It's going to take time though. And heart rate's you think about just even that, we've known it for what that is for a long time, to be able to stay within this range, danger, non-danger, other pieces. It's not perfect, it's not exact, but it gives you a nice range of where people could fall in. It's kind of a different example, but yeah.
I understand the need for this. I understand the desirability of this. But I don't understand, it isn't clear to me, where does the engineering of this become deployed? In a helmet, it seems intuitive, but what about, is it in fabric? Is it in a band? How are you doing the engineering?
So you're saying, how would MC10 do it, or how would the world do it?
To capture the data, if one is measuring, say, arm fatigue, how are you going to capture the data of a particular muscle? And then once you capture it, what's the deployment mechanism of the data?
Therein lies the $1 million question. Wow. So the ability to be able to be non-invasive as well as capture that data is very tricky, right?
And what's the engineering of the capture?
So that is left up to innovation overall, right? And the ability to be able to design around that, a hardware that is, the way I think about it is seamless, right? You have this seamless experience where it's integrated into your gameplay and you don't even think about it.
Are you thinking like an Apple Watch, or is it something more fibrous?
So I guess if you think about an Apple Watch, would you wear an Apple Watch during very intense gameplay? Would you wear rigid, boxy electronics? You wouldn't, right? So therein lies the engineering innovation that has to happen. And it really speaks to how MC10 has thought about from the birth of, kind of the brainchild of why would you continue to use boxy, rigid electronics for other use cases in and around the body, et cetera. And that has really been our focus for a long period of time, but therein lies one of the more difficult challenges. How can you deploy electronics without it being obtrusive, invasive, bulky, distracting? It came up with a way to rewrite design rules from rigid boxy electronics to non-invasive flexible electronics. And that is where we lie as we stand. And we've been at it 6 years now to be able to take that as an idea all the way to, idea in the lab, as well as proven in the lab, be able to take that with design rules to make in a larger way.
And you see a financial gain by 2019. So we're 4 years out. Are you thinking you can have something on the market in 4 years?
Well, when I mentioned the size of the market, I was just saying the market's growing. I think timing around deploying electronics, depending on what use case you talk about, because there's a list of 20, 30, 40, and honestly, it can scale from there depending on what is important, what markets are really important to innovation at large. It's kind of really going to tell that. So I was kind of given this perspective of this is the opportunity for innovation around this is kind of the white space you looked at for different ideas around what could be meaningful to the end user, given you have this actual metric to make it meaningful. But there's different ways at becoming revenue positive. Yes.
So the sports world is known for being notoriously kind of averse to change or slow moving, particularly in levels of management, coaching. I could see a coach, if a computer is telling him Isaiah needs to wait a little bit longer to recover from this injury, him ignoring it, disputing it. So just curious, have you encountered any opposition to the overall approach from the NFL community?
Oh, it's a good question. So I think there's different levels of openness to change. There is a change in the mindset of this old school mentality across sports of, this is the way we've always done things, the way we've always scouted, the way we've always coached, to kind of this new age of being able to look at different metrics and how that could tie in. But in the end, the coach has to be able to see a change and a difference over time. It makes it a lot easier from the management team as well as the coaches to be able to understand where there could be potential value in this and understand how this could drive in tandem, kind of tethered with a really, really good coaching plan and strategy on, I want to put my players in the best position possible on Sunday. It's not that crazy. It shouldn't be that crazy for coaches to think that. And does it takes a certain amount of kind of dipping your toe in the water, then going further around that. But that shouldn't seem crazy to a lot of people to be able to say. I mean, think about it. Think about whatever the top players in the world. You think about LeBron James. The fact that LeBron James doesn't know what his output is every single night, one of the top players in the world is crazy, right? Think about him as a massive, massive investment by Cleveland Cavaliers for him not to know, and for them not to know every single which way he has left it all on the court and understand how he needs to replace and what he needs to do, and come in a lot of different ways. But energy expenditure overall. It shouldn't happen, right? And you start to understand how that can really, really come back, and not necessarily even during gameplay, but what are those data points that led up to that, to how big his performance was, and how amazing his performance was, and how well he felt crossed up with that. So the time's coming, and I think the old school mentality, just from my own personal experience, is slowly changing. I mentioned the MIT Sports Analytics Conference. They've done a really good job. I've been there 6 years in a row now, and it's amazing how minds are changing, and from the elite level all the way down. It's pretty cool to see. But there are obviously people that thinks it could be hocus pocus, everything else, et cetera. The fact is it's not a stretch. I mean, I think you can think about it, you sit down and think about it for long periods of time. Putting parameters around feeling good. If you put it in the basic terms, it makes sense, and it should make sense to a lot of people. Yeah.
So you guys are obviously designing sensors that are worn on the body that are really intuitive and flexible. Where do you see the intersection from when it's on the body to in the body?
So you're going from non-invasive to invasive. I think.
Or is that even the next step?
You, as far as MC10, or as far as where I think there's a lot to be discovered for sure on an invasive approach. I would say the lead time to be able to go through a regulatory process of making that safe and deployable is quite long. So that kind of process just takes a little longer, a lot longer, being able to do that. I think there's real value to be had there eventually, depending on what you want to look at, right? And in the end, you always got to kind of, what's the problem you're trying to solve and why, being able to do that. But, 100%, if you can do that safe and effectively, yeah, but there's a lot of challenges that go along with that as well.
As someone who's had, you said 7 concussions in your career,
Mhm.
How much do you think the NFL cares about preventing head injuries, the long-term effects of head injuries, that kind of thing?
So the game, I'll start with this. The game has absolutely changed from when I retired to where it is now, and what I would call the medical umbrella, where it's okay to admit to a concussion, is now out there, and that is something subtle but very important. Didn't exist. It was almost like a black mark on you if you admitted to that. And I've gone through and not admitted to several different types of concussions where I wish I could have, and I just didn't feel like there was enough. I would look soft in a lot of ways, and that mentality has changed, which is huge. And 100%, I believe Roger Goodell and the NFL absolutely want to cause change, and they're doing the right things and they're taking the right steps in order to be able to do that. And he's already had a lot of rule changes. He's reiterated and shown how serious he is time after time. And I think that kind of proofs in the pudding on, the ability, to make those rule changes and then be able to come down with the force of erring on the side of caution over and over again around gameplay is great, because for far too long it was not on the side of caution. It was kind of like the wild, wild west if you thought about head trauma concussions. And it's not like that, and it's now swung this other way where, listen, if there is a defenseless receiver, for example, you can hit him. You don't hit him, head first against his head. It's just not going to happen. I don't care how many excuses you make up. It's just not going to happen. And drawing the line in the sand around that, it sends a strong message to not only other NFL players but sports the world over. On the game's going to change. Either with it, you're going to be an outcast.
So a big technical problem in wearable is how do you measure energy expenditure? I think you mentioned it. Can you comment a little bit of how MC10 is approaching this big technical problem? And I guess it's crucial to sport metrics in general. So how do you approach it technically?
I would love to tell you, but I can't. I'm not at liberty to be able to discuss that as of right now. I think that as you mentioned, there is a lot of people the world over looking at that and trying to understand how you can do that accurately across different types of activity, whether you tie it to your wrists or whether you tie it to a strap or whether you tie it to other aspects of your body. And in the end, I'm telling you, it shouldn't be about one device trying to guess what you're doing. It should be about a device actually measuring what you are doing over a course of time, where you start to understand and get that true picture of whether I'm kind of sitting at my desk all day and gathering different type of suite of sensing modalities tied together to be able to say this is what your day looked like at the end of the day, whether I'm on the field or a court or somewhere else. This is what your day looked like. This is what your expenditure looked like, and having an accurate point of view around that.
Yeah, back to the heads just real quick, the head trauma. Like, you do understand, like, the insurance policy that the NFL is fighting to get against this, right? It goes hand in hand. If you could prove over your life, maybe in the next 20 years, that the concussions that you took playing for the Hawks affected you in a negative light, it caused some sort of depression, like junior Seau, for example, whatever, they could prove that. like the lawsuits are out the woodworks from the NFL. Like it wouldn't be like, think about actually how bad it would be for the NFL and the committee if you could prove that you were forced to play because of the soft label, right? If they actually had the answer for it, saying, "Oh no, your head, you got whacked, you're dizzy," like every single time an offense, a left tackle with DN go head to head, or a nose guard in the center for it, whatever, right? And you could prove it, and they were just saying, "No, you're concussed, you're concussed, you're concussed." I mean, doesn't that completely, completely change the game? I mean, you can't change. Like a defenseless receiver, a DB coming downfield, sometimes isn't going to be even know it, but it's because it's human athletics that just take over your body to make a play. Next thing you know is you've laid this guy out cold, but it wasn't your thought process. But it's not a computer game because you're reacting. So you can't just say, "Don't hit a defenseless." You know that.
Yeah.
You can't don't hit a defenseless receiver. Okay, but you're in the moment. There's 80,000 people. You're going crazy. Like, I think everything outside of football, 100% makes sense. But I think go too far in this industry with football, and it's just not a game anymore. It's not. It won't be insurable. It will be deemed unfit to play.
No, I mean, you make some good points. And the fact is, I'm going to go back to my main point. The game has to change the way it's played, 100%. If it does not, it doesn't even have a chance, right? And that is, yeah, I agree with you 100% around that. The idea of not being able to reinforce safe technique through kind of a slap in the head, I think the mentality absolutely has to change, and the way you think about hitting and the way you think about tackling absolutely has to change. And that's where you start to see the game as you picture it now is going to be slightly altered. And I don't call it softer; it's just different, and it's smarter. Yeah, exactly. And the idea, kind of leading with your head as a choice weapon for destruction is that idea is going to be gone. And the way that you played football and I played football, and the way you started to really take on blocks and tackle and all those aspects are gone. And there has to be, again, you can say you're going to do it, but also having this level of accountability around being able to do that is important. But things are not so cut and dry, and I agree with you. But I'll go back to the game absolutely has to change on how it's played, technique-wise. Yes.
What kind of feedback from the junior high school and high school markets? Is that something that MC10 has pursued?
So are you talking about technology overall as we think about?
No, I'm thinking about whether you've approached junior high school and high schools about such a product.
Oh, you talking about the specific measuring force of impact?
The NC10 product that I'm assuming you're trying to develop.
Yeah. So MC10, I led the development of a way to measure force of impact to the head, which is called the check light. So that has embedded our electronics into a skull cap and be able to measure helmeted, not helmeted sports. The ability then, as we've moved past and developed the biostamp, which is a thin electronic patch, location agnostic around the body, is a different set of use cases. You can start to think about a lot of different ways in order to deploy that. And 100% have we thought in both ways, both different types of products around elite athlete all the way down to youth sports, 100%. And to understand how that really is an extension of a lot of the things that are done at the elite level in a lot of different ways. And quite honestly, looking at the elite level for guidance is the way you adopt technology and adopt rule change, everything else, adopt style of play is one of those things that we've spent a lot of time looking at. But again, it depends on what use case you're talking about and how you can measure that. I think just looking at being able to capture how hard you've worked every day at practice. There's very few people that have done it, but being able to look at that day after day after day is interesting, and that's kind of every single level of athletics you can look at for that. Okay.
Isaiah, in terms of the industry as it stands today, where do you see the greatest gains in measuring the technology, wearable technology, as it relates to measuring athletic performance?
I would myself, and kind of knowing my career and knowing where I wanted to optimize, is this 24-hour picture of the way I thought about preparation and being better. And I wanted to put myself in the right position to be able to do that. And one of those things where I wanted to see how some aspects of my life were affecting other aspects of my life in a way that was somewhat objective. And that 24-hour picture of output during intense play to all the way through sleep and then back around again, and being able to look at that in an accurate way, in a way where you could use a device to be able to look at that. I would say, having some guidance around that day to day, and understanding that as I practiced on my own, as I prepared on my own, as I looked at output overall, as I looked at things that I could add and affect levels of stress, readiness, fatigue, etc. As I thought about that, and how sleep plays a role in that, and you can look back and look at various attributes around that, be able to dial in that 24-hour picture and understand how I can put myself in the best position to feel good tomorrow. And even for me now, I'm not an athlete, but I want to feel good tomorrow. If you tell me ways in which I could take advantage of to feel better, that are accurate, they're actually measuring what you say you're measuring, then I'm all for it. I'm all for it every single day, and I'll follow it to be able to put myself in that best position to be able to do that.
I want to thank you everyone for coming, and if you could join me in thanking Isaiah for a great talk tonight.